Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to completely flip the script on how you think about personal finance. We are unpacking the core concepts of Morgan Housel's brilliant insights, which show us that financial survival and ultimate success are actually driven far less by complex math, spreadsheets, or high IQ, and much, much more by everyday human psychology.
Okay, let's dive right into this totally jarring contrast. On the left, we have Grace Groner. Now, Grace was an everyday secretary. She lived super humbly in a one-bedroom house, never even drove a car, and yet she left a staggering $7 million to charity when she passed away at age 100. Then, on the right, we've got Richard Fuscone. He was a Harvard-educated Merrill Lynch executive. He literally had all the pedigree and industry connections you could possibly ask for, but he ended up declaring personal bankruptcy after the financial crisis, losing his massive 20,000-square-foot home. Managing money is kind of crazy when you think about it, because it's perhaps the only field in the entire world where a completely uncredentialed everyday person can so vastly outperform a highly educated industry expert.
And that story brilliantly illustrates our core theme for today. Investing is not the study of finance. It's the study of how people behave with money. In the real world, brilliant logic and prestigious degrees almost always lose out to simple emotional discipline. The secret to Grace's incredible success wasn't some hidden Wall Street algorithm. It was just decades of patience and steady behavior. Section 1. Luck, Risk, and Survival. The story of 1929. To really understand this behavioral phenomenon, we have to look back at the extreme turbulence of the 1929 stock market crash. Just consider the sheer magnitude of $3 billion. Back in October 1929, legendary trader Jesse Livermore made the modern equivalent of that massive number in a single day, just by betting against the market. While literally everyone else was losing everything, including a highly successful real estate magnate named Abraham Germansky, who tragically lost his entire fortune and his life, Livermore went home to his family and celebrated his greatest triumph. He was on top of the world. But here is the real tragedy, and honestly, the vital lesson for us. Just 4 years after making that unbelievable fortune, Livermore disappeared. He was completely broke. You see, his massive success in 1929 filled him with this deadly overconfidence, and it led him to take larger, increasingly reckless bets until he lost every single penny. It perfectly proves a critical point about the nature of money. Making it and keeping it are two entirely different games. So, if we break it down, the crucial point is this. The psychological traits required to get wealthy are actually the exact opposite of the traits required to stay wealthy. Getting wealthy demands bold risk-taking and pure, unfiltered optimism. But if you want to keep that wealth, you really have to flip a switch in your brain. Staying wealthy requires frugality, a healthy dose of fear, extreme paranoia, and the humility to realize that past success might just be a stroke of luck, not a guarantee of the future. And you absolutely must master that paranoia. Just look at this statistic. An astonishing 40% of successful public companies eventually lose effectively all their value over time. Simply surviving capitalism is incredibly hard. If you don't actively cultivate a survival mindset, you risk wiping out everything you've worked so hard to build. Moving on to Section 2, the magic of compounding. Endurance beats brilliance. Now, everyone knows Warren Buffett, right? But almost nobody knows Rick Guerin. 40 years ago, they were investing partners. They were equally brilliant, equally skilled. But consider their wildly different paths. Buffett achieved massive longevity by avoiding debt and surviving 14 different recessions without panicking. Guerin, on the other hand, well, he was in a hurry to get rich. He used heavy margin loans to leverage his investments. So when the 1974 downturn hit, Guerin got completely wiped out and actually had to sell his shares back to Buffett for pennies. Buffett won by simply enduring. Which brings us to this golden rule: never interrupt it unnecessarily. To let your money grow into something extraordinary, you must resist the agonizing emotional urge to panic sell during a recession or to chase some hot stock tip you overheard at a party. You have to allow your money the uninterrupted decades it requires to really grow. Time is the secret ingredient here, not timing. Section 3. Wealth is invisible. The ego versus the bank account. Let's uncover a massive behavioral trap where materialism silently destroys our ability to let our money compound. Be honest with yourself for a second and turn the lens inward. When you see someone roll up in a flashy Ferrari, do you actually admire the driver or do you just imagine yourself in the car? It's called the rich man in the car paradox. We buy luxury items to signal status, but the brutal irony is that onlookers don't care about you at all. They're just busy picturing themselves in the driver's seat. Spending money to show people how much money you have is the absolute fastest way to have less of it. And that brings us to this critical definition. We have to separate being rich from being truly wealthy. Being rich, that's highly visible. It's a high income being actively spent on flashy things. But wealth? Wealth is totally invisible. It is the cars you didn't buy. It's the diamonds you left at the store. It's the renovations you postponed. Wealth is unspent optionality. It's the savings that give you ultimate freedom and control over your time, which, at the end of the day, is the highest dividend money can possibly pay. Section 4, Navigating Financial Emotions, the heart over the head. Let's break down the specific psychological triggers that cause us to sabotage that invisible wealth we just talked about. We have all felt these primal emotions override our logic. Fear makes us feel a loss so intensely that we panic sell right at the bottom. Greed whispers in our ear to take massive, foolish risks to get rich quick. Meanwhile, anxiety and depression can cause total decision paralysis, literally tricking us into abandoning our meticulously crafted plans at the exact wrong moment. Section 5. Reasonable beats rational, building a plan for reality. To combat these overwhelming emotions, we have to step away from the flawless math of a spreadsheet and step into the messy reality of human psychology. Look, a mathematically rational plan is completely useless if the sheer agony of a 30% market downturn makes you abandon it in a total panic. The mathematically optimal move during a bull market might be to hold zero cash, but the psychological toll of doing that is massive. Instead, you need a reasonable plan. A reasonable strategy actually accounts for your personal emotional limits. It might mean keeping more cash on hand than a spreadsheet says you should, simply so you can sleep peacefully at night and actually stay invested for the long haul. I absolutely love this quote because it drives home our foundational rule of survival. Preventing one desperate, ill-timed decision during a massive panic does far more for your lifetime returns than successfully picking a dozen winning stocks. It's really about building a margin of safety around your life so you never ever get forced out of the game. To achieve this, you have to cultivate what's called a barbelled personality. Now, I know it sounds like a contradiction, but it's essential. You need to balance a deeply held, sensible optimism in long-term economic progress with an intense short-term paranoia. You expect the long-term trajectory to go up and to the right, for sure, but you are utterly convinced that the road between here and there is totally filled with landmines. And history absolutely proves this barbelled mindset is correct. Across just the last century, we've experienced the Great Depression, world wars, catastrophic financial crises, global pandemics, and relentless natural disasters. Barely a day has gone by without a tangible, real reason for deep pessimism. Yet, because of the relentless engine of human innovation and compounding, the overall standard of living still grew 20-fold. Progress happens right in the middle of continuous destruction. So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with this final vital question to really chew on. Is your financial plan built for a perfect world, or can it survive reality? Because if your plan relies on everything going exactly right, it is going to break. But if you craft a plan that expects the world to break, a plan that respects your own human emotions and relies on endurance over sheer brilliance, you will secure not just your wealth, but your lifelong peace of mind. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Start planning for reality and let time do the heavy lifting.